Okay, let's unpack this. Sometimes as a parent, I find myself staring at the world my children are set to inherit, and I can't help but wonder what kind of roofs will shelter them, you know? What sort of walls will they actually call their own?
Hmm.
Because let's be honest, for so many of us, housing today feels less like a stable foundation for life
Yeah,
and more like, I don't know, a lottery ticket or maybe a speculative chip in someone else's game.
it really does feel that way sometimes.
And in that worry, a really powerful voice from decades ago keeps echoing in my mind. Dolores Hayden,
Ah, yes, Aiden.
an architect, a historian, a feminist. Back in 1980, she asked what was then a truly groundbreaking question. What would a non-sexist city be like?
A huge question.
Especially then.
Right. This was when women were entering the workforce in like unprecedented numbers, but constantly hitting these walls, a built environment that felt almost designed to trap them.
Isolated kitchens, endless commutes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So today we're embarking on a deep dive into Hayden's, well, radical vision.
We'll contrast it with a fascinating historical counterexample and then bring it right up to now, looking at modern housing debates.
Seeing how things line up
Sure.
or don't.
Yeah, our mission really is to understand what it means today to design homes and cities that, don't exploit but sustain, that don't enclose but open up.
Cities that take care as their sort of fundamental ground plan.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So, digging into Hayden's work, what did she really uncover about the suburb that was so groundbreaking? Because for many, it's just, well, it's where people live, right?
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Hayden diagnosed the suburb not as some neutral landscape, tidy houses, green lawns.
Right, the stereotype.
Yeah, but as a machine. Quite deliberately engineered, she argued, to reinforce the sexual division of labor.
A machine. Wow, so think about it. The nuclear household structure. Male breadwinner, female homemaker.
That whole setup was literally inscribed into everything. Every floor plan, every mortgage scheme, every single zoning law.
So it wasn't just an accident, it was built in.
Yeah.
Baked into the system.
Absolutely.
And I remember her critique of duplication as well. What was she getting at there?
The duplication point. She saw this capitalist logic everywhere. Every single family.
Yeah.
Expected to have their own washing machine, their own fridge, their own car, their own lawnmower.
Right. One of everything per house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just about, buying stuff. It created incredible isolation and this endless privatized cycle of unpaid work.
Doing the laundry alone, cooking alone.
Millions of households buying the same appliances they probably only used once or twice a week, each in their own private little box. Yeah. You can almost hear the collective hum of a million dishwashers running at the same time, all separate.
It's almost comically inefficient when you put it like that.
It really is, and exhausting.
Yeah, utterly exhausting. And for working women trying to navigate this landscape, Hayden described a kind of profound hostility. Can you paint a clearer picture of that? What did that feel like?
It was a palpable hostility. I mean, imagine the sheer exhaustion.
Yeah.
Endless car trips just to pick up a kid from a daycare miles away.
The school run nightmare.
Totally. Or that quiet despair of seeing essential services, doctors, groceries, whatever, perpetually out of reach because of how the very landscape was designed.
Zoning keeping things separate.
Right. Long commutes, hardly any collective childcare, services pushed out by restrictive zoning. It was an environment designed to just siphon off labor and energy, all in the name of privacy and, individual home ownership.
That's such a powerful critique, but what's really fascinating is Hayden didn't just stop at the diagnosis, did she? She offered this radical reimagining. Tell us about homes.
She did. And that's what's so compelling. Hayden refused to just critique. She offered a concrete, pretty radical alternative. She called her proposal homes.
Homes.
Which stood for homemakers organizations for a more egalitarian society.
Okay.
And these weren't just abstract ideas. They were detailed plans for communities, maybe around 40 households, where labor and care were shared, instead of being endlessly reproduced behind closed doors.
40 households. Sharing kitchens. Laundry. I mean, I can imagine some listeners immediately thinking, well, what about privacy? Or, individual autonomy? Did she get into that?
That's a really valid point. And yeah, Hayden was pragmatic about it. She saw these communal elements as a choice, right? Not some kind of mandate. They were designed to free individuals, especially women, not constrain them.
Okay, so it's about adding options, not taking them away.
Exactly. Imagine collective kitchens offering pre-prepared meals if you want them. Shared laundries with, proper commercial-grade machines that actually work well. Community gardens cutting food costs, providing green space. even shared transport.
Right. Less duplication.
Less duplication, less waste. It wasn't just about convenience, though. It was about freeing up time and energy for people, while also conserving resources, offering genuine choice and flexibility that the isolated suburban house just couldn't.
And her vision for kids in this.
That was particularly poignant. She imagined children growing up in neighborhoods intentionally designed to hold them, meeting their needs as a public concern, not just a private burden shuffled onto, usually, the mother.
So she wasn't just sketching prettier houses. She was really tackling the environmental and social waste of a whole way of life.
Precisely. And expanding on that, her ultimate takeaway was pretty uncompromising. She said, without transforming the built environment, exhortations about equality would collapse under the weight of suburban design.
Wow, so the physical space is the political issue.
Absolutely. To house women differently was to make equality tangible, to set solidarity right into the foundations, let the walls carry some of the work that individuals had been forced to bear alone.
She was really confronting what she called the capitalist domesticity problem.
Exactly that system where each private household just endlessly consumes and reproduces unpaid labor behind closed doors. She offered a blueprint where care, dignity, collective life. They were built into the city's very fabric.
It's a truly transformative vision, but it makes me wonder, how did other societies facing maybe different but equally profound housing challenges approach these same problems? Was there anything similar or radically different happening elsewhere?
Let's pivot now. Completely different historical model. While Hayden was diagnosing the American suburb, half a world away, the Soviet Union faced this housing crisis on an unimaginable scale.
Right. After the Great Patriotic War, as they called it, World War II's Eastern Front.
Yeah. Entire cities.
Okay.
Like Stalingrad.
Yeah.
Just rubble, millions displaced.
Yeah.
The task wasn't abstract planning. It was survival.
Pure survival. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what followed in the Soviet Union was, frankly, one of the fastest, most ambitious housing programs in modern history.
Faster than...
Well, within a generation, they managed to rehouse tens of millions of people. Now, not with luxury or fancy details, but with the plain dignity of, walls, heating, indoor plumbing, basics that many lacked.
And the core unit of this rebuilding was the microrayon. The microrayon, yes. Think of it as a self-contained block, designed as a complete urban cell.
What did that mean in practice?
Well, each microrayon was intentionally designed to include schools, kindergartens, clinics, shops, all carefully placed.
Okay.
So that children, ideally, never had to cross a major road to get to school. And essential services were supposed to be within a 10-minute walk from every single home.
Wow. Imagine that. After total war, not just rebuilding roofs, but designing neighborhoods where a kid doesn't cross a highway for school.
It's a stark contrast to the school run many of us deal with today, isn't it?
Definitely.
The logic was profound, even if the execution varied. Housing wasn't just shelter. It was about safety, education, collective care, built right in.
And the famous Khrushchevkas, those 5-story apartment blocks?
Right. The Khrushchevkas rolled out in the 50s and 60s. Modest, yes, prefabricated, often basic, but they represented a huge transformation. They provided private space for families who'd previously lived in incredibly overcrowded conditions, often communal apartments.
And this all happened under incredibly difficult circumstances, right? What was the guiding principle, given the scarcity they faced?
Absolutely. Severe conditions of scarcity. They faced a strict Western embargo, couldn't import advanced machinery, even basic tech sometimes. Resources were massively strained by the Cold War arms race.
So how did they prioritize housing?
The guiding principle, at least officially, remained people before profit. Housing was framed as an entitlement, not a commodity. Rents were symbolic, capped at a tiny fraction of income.
A social right.
A roof, heat, access to schools. Guaranteed as a social right, not something you gambled on in the market.
That's not the story we usually hear in the West, is it? The caricature is often just dreary, uniform concrete blocks.
Exactly. And that common image, it erases the crucial context. These blocks were built at breakneck pace after total war. They provided the first secure housing millions had ever known.
Right, the baseline was often much worse.
Much worse. And critically, whatever their aesthetic flaws, they were designed with care and proximity at their core. A model utterly inverted from capitalist suburbia, which often maximized consumption and isolation.
So different goals entirely.
Yeah. The Soviet model, however austere, however flawed in practice later on, was initially built for survival, for safety, and for this stubborn insistence that shelter was a fundamental human right.
Okay, so we've explored these two really distinct historical paths. Hayden's radical vision for shared care, the Soviet imperative of basic dignity. But if we pull the lens forward to our present moment, what kind of conversations are we hearing about housing today? It feels like a very different tune. Today, a very different chorus seems to dominate housing debates.
We hear a lot about the abundance bros mantra,
Oh,
right?
yes, the abundance argument.
Build more and the market will sort itself out. It sounds so neat, doesn't it? Technocratic,
Yeah,
very appealing to like Silicon Valley logic and the financiers backing them.
it does sound simple. But what does that actually mean in practice for people, just trying to find a place to live?
Right. This raises the key question. What does this abundance actually look like on the ground? Because the new units these advocates demand, well, in practice, they're not flowing into the hands of ordinary families who desperately need homes.
So where are they going?
They're being hoovered up, often in bulk, by private equity firms, rolled into these huge rental portfolios, and then released back to the public at market rate. And we all know what market rate means in most major cities today.
Yeah, permanently unaffordable for a lot of people.
Exactly. Permanently unaffordable. The consequence is stark. Homeownership declines, stability erodes, and for younger generations especially, the horizon of a secure home just retreats further and further away.
It feels like an ideological sleight of hand, almost.
Well, some of the sources we looked at argue it is an ideological sleight of hand. When certain authors publish books on abundance, it's presented as forward-thinking policy. But the really unsettling insight here, according to this critique, is that abundance isn't just a potentially flawed policy. It might be a brilliant misdirection.
How so?
By channeling genuine public frustration because people are frustrated about housing into this simplistic supply-side solution, well, it effectively deflects attention from the deeper structural reforms that someone like Hayden was demanding.
Keeps the focus off things like rent control, social housing, land reform.
Exactly. It keeps the asset pipeline open and profitable without ever addressing the fundamental human need for shelter. It's described by some critics as a masterclass in making the problem seem solvable by the very forces that helped create it.
So it's not just ineffective, maybe, but actively designed to redirect the conversation away from more fundamental changes.
Precisely. In this framing, abundance isn't really about the flourishing of families or the dignity of shelter. It's about keeping that asset pipeline open and profitable for capital. It functions as what some in the source material literally call a psyop, a psychological operation. It buys time for a status quo that has no real intention of breaking with financialization. The result isn't abundance for people, it's abundance for capital, a proliferation of units that ordinary families will likely never own.
Okay, so what does this all mean when we bring these threads together? We've got Dolores Hayden's vision, the Soviet approach, today's market-driven abundance. What's the core conflict here?
Well, for Dolores Hayden, and in its own way for the Soviets, housing was meant to be, fundamentally, a collective right.
Right, not just shelter.
Not just walls and roofs. It was the ground on which care could happen. Childcare embedded in the block, schools and clinics within easy reach, shared kitchens and gardens to ease the daily burden. However imperfectly it was realized, both traditions started from this conviction that people deserved to live with dignity and support.
And the story now, in the West.
The story, in the context of what the sources describe as the neoliberal West, is starkly different. Here, housing has been fundamentally transformed into an asset class.
Right, something to invest in.
Something to buy and hold,
Yeah.
to speculate on, to trade. Homes become financial instruments, packaged into portfolios, leveraged for profit.
The effect?
The effect is a new kind of enclosure. That's a powerful way to think about it. What was once a common expectation, that families could build stable lives inside affordable housing, has been progressively fenced off.
Fenced off.
The right to dwell is replaced by the obligation to pay rent, indefinitely for many.
That's a chilling parallel to Hayden's initial critique of the suburb, isn't it? That idea of enclosure.
It is, where the suburb, in her analysis, trapped women in kitchens, reproducing unpaid labor behind closed doors. Today, entire generations are trapped in rent cycles, locked out of ownership, denied security, asked to live at the mercy of markets that, frankly, never cared about their flourishing.
It's the same logic, just refracted through time.
That's the argument. Enclosure of space, enclosure of care, enclosure of possibility. And seeing this clearly isn't about, romanticizing the past. The Soviet system had huge problems. Hayden's vision was never fully built.
Of course.
But it is crucial to remind ourselves that other arrangements have been imagined. and even attempted. Hayden's homes, the Soviet microrayon, they aren't just historical curiosities. They're fragments of a different, maybe more humane horizon for housing.
As a parent, I can't help but come back to that initial question, the one about what comes next. My children and those growing up alongside them, they're being readied for a world where housing really isn't a promise. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
Every year, the prices rise, the landlords consolidate, the rent checks stretch further and further into the future. And in this context, Haiti's original question, what would a non-sexist city be like? It just comes back with these sharper, almost desperate edges.
It feels less utopian now.
It feels like a survival imperative. It really does. So let me leave you, the listener, with these questions. Straight from the heart of this deep dive for you to ponder, what will it actually mean to live in homes owned by funds whose only loyalty is to yield? What does that feel like? What will it mean to watch entire blocks become basically spreadsheets, while kitchens and gardens vanish into these isolated boxes of consumption? What will it mean to raise children in neighborhoods where the school is across 4 lanes of traffic, where care is outsourced to the cheapest bidder, where the commute just eats the hours meant for love, for connection? What does it mean to inherit debt instead of soil, rent receipts instead of roots? A future written in interest rates, not in the laughter of neighbors. And then, contrast that. What would it mean instead to walk the paths Hayden drew? 40 households sharing care, labor divided and dignified, solidarity built right into the walls. What would it mean to see again what the Soviets glimpsed, however imperfectly? A school within 10 minutes, a clinic round the corner, courtyards green and unbroken by cars. Housing guaranteed not as profit, but as life. Unless housing is reclaimed, truly reclaimed as a fundamental human right, as a foundation for genuine care and community, well, the non-sexist city, the truly humane city, it's just going to remain deferred.
Deferred.
And our children, and theirs, will inherit only debt and enclosure. The question, then, isn't really whether Hayden's vision is relevant anymore.
No.
The question is whether we are willing to build a world where visions like that can actually become the ground under their feet.